Yes, great.
Thank you, and thank you all. Good to be together on this day for us to commune and accomplish something useful together. I mentioned it's snowing, and that's a big deal here. We've had no moisture for several months and wildfires raging in the mountains with heroic firefighters risking their lives to save property, homes, and people. Today, a snowstorm has rolled in to blanket Colorado, particularly northern Colorado, so it comes as quite a relief, very timely. I'd like to begin by reading words written by a woman who lives in the Amazon basin. It's from a letter that was later published by The Guardian. Many people might dismiss what she has to say out of hand because, after all, she's a woman and not very sophisticated in the ways of the world, never went to college. So therefore, what does she know and what can she say that has value? I would disagree. Her words ring true to me, and perhaps they will to you as well. She writes, "Dear presidents of the 9 Amazonian countries, and to all world leaders that share responsibility for the plundering of our rainforest. My name is Namante Nenkimo. I am a Warani woman, a mother, and a leader of my people. The Amazon rainforest is my home. I am writing you this letter because the fires are raging still, because the corporations are spilling oil in our rivers, because the miners are stealing gold, as they have been for 500 years, and leaving behind open pits and toxins. Because the land grabbers are cutting down primary forest so that the cattle can graze, plantations can be grown, and the white man can eat. Because our elders are dying from coronavirus while you are planning your next moves to cut up our lands to stimulate an economy that has never benefited us. Because as indigenous peoples, we are fighting to protect what we love, our way of life, our rivers, the animals, our forests, life on earth. And it is time you listen to us. In each of our many hundreds of different languages across the Amazon, we have a word for you, the outsider, the stranger. In my language, Wow Terdido, that word is Kawari. And it doesn't need to be a bad word, but you have made it so. For us, the word has come to mean, and in a terrible way, your society has come to represent, the white man that knows too little for the power that he wields and the damage that he causes. You are probably not used to an indigenous woman calling you ignorant. and less so on a platform such as this. But for Indigenous peoples, it is clear. The less you know about something, the less value it has to you. And it is easier to destroy. And by easy, I mean guiltlessly, remorselessly, foolishly, even righteously. And this is exactly what you are doing to us as Indigenous peoples, to our rainforest territories, and ultimately to our planet's climate. It took us thousands of years to get to know the Amazon rainforest, to understand her ways, her secrets, to learn how to survive and thrive with her. And for my people, the Wayorani, we have known you for only 70 years. We were contacted in the 1950s by American evangelical missionaries, but we are fast learners. And you are not as complex as the rainforest. When you say that the oil companies have marvelous new technologies that can sip the oil from beneath our lands like hummingbirds sip nectar from a flower, we know that you are lying because we live downriver from the spills. When you say that the Amazon is not burning, we do not need satellite images to prove you wrong. We are choking on the smoke of the fruit orchards that our ancestors planted centuries ago. When you say you are urgently looking for climate solutions, yet continue to build a world economy based on extraction and pollution, we know that you are lying because we are closest to the land and the first to hear her cries. I have never had the chance to go to a university and become a doctor or a lawyer, a politician or a scientist. My elders are my teachers. The forest is my teacher. And I have learned enough, and I speak shoulder to shoulder with my Indigenous brothers and sisters across the world, to know that you have lost your way and that you are in trouble, though you don't fully understand it yet. And the trouble is a threat to every form of life on Earth. You forced your civilization upon us, and now look where we are. Global pandemic, climate crisis, species extinction, and driving it all, widespread spiritual poverty. In all these years of taking from our lands, you have not had the courage or the curiosity or the respect to get to know us, to understand how we see and think and feel, and what we know about life on Earth. I won't be able to teach you this in letter either. But what I can say is that it has to do with thousands and thousands of years of love for this forest, for this place. Love in the deepest sense, as reverence. The forest has taught us how to walk lightly. And because we have listened, learned, and defended her, she has given us everything: water, clean air, nourishment, shelter, medicines, happiness, meaning. And you are taking all this away, not just from us, but from everyone on this planet and from future generations. It is early morning in the Amazon, just before first light, a time that is meant for us to share our dreams, our most potent thoughts. And so I say to all of you, the earth does not expect you to save her. She expects you to respect her. And we, as Indigenous people, expect the same. These are powerful words. In a sense, this woman is speaking for the finest in all of us. And I think she is also speaking for the planetary consciousness that we sometimes call Mother Earth, who is asking for respect and wants to be worked with, not against. I know there are some who have said that Mother Earth must be getting pretty angry with the way we've abused our resources, polluted the rivers, the air, the earth, torn it up, and that one day she will angrily strike back at humankind. That's not true. Because the essence of Mother Earth, this planetary awareness, is love. And any good mother knows that even when a child misbehaves, you don't start to hate that child and want to strike back angrily. No matter what the child has done, even a grown-up child, a mother still loves her children. Now, that doesn't mean corrective action may not be taken on occasion, and that could happen to restore balance on the planet. But done because it's the right thing to do, out of love. There's actually a balance, one could say, between the living symbol of the male aspect of love in the sun and the female essence of love in the earth. The sun is the father of our solar system. It extends radiation continually, which includes heat and light, but is much more than that, and enfolds everything in the solar system, and its influence extends beyond. When there is a romance between the female spirit of giving and bringing forth present in the earth and the male expression of purpose and direction as provided by the sun, life is brought forth in a dizzying array of possibilities. But the sun is far away, I think about 93 million miles. So how can it have a direct interaction with all the details of life on Earth? It's worked it out. The sun has a representative of its influence on Earth through mankind, humankind, consciousness of men and women. But that kind of understanding and cooperation with this beautiful earthly home of ours has been absent for a long time. Nature has been left to its own devices, and has become pretty unruly, even violent, out of control, because humankind has not been present to establish the control and design that is symbolized by the love of the sun. We often use the word spirit and speak about spiritual governance to describe the way the heavenly influence is brought to bear on earthly matters. But I find that that's a word that's rather vague. So I looked it up. And the dictionary says spirit is an animating or vital principle held to give life to physical organisms. Well, maybe that helps a little bit. We know that when life is present, in one of us, for example, we're alive, we can do things. And when that force is not present, that force is moving back to be recycled. It's no longer alive. But that still sounds a bit vague to me. So I came up with a new definition. Spirit is the invisible connection between the inner realm we call heaven and the earthly realm. Spirit is the vibratory carrier wave that penetrates body, mind, and heart. It carries divine impulses from the inner realm to be translated into human experience. Ah, that's a bit more specific. So spirit is the means by which what's present in the inner planes, the inner realm that we call heaven, is transmitted and interpreted by our earthly capacities so that we can act in concert with what is moving everywhere. The way it has been, people have been so distracted by all of the things in the earth and trying to manipulate them to their own advantage that this vibratory carrier wave, as I've called it, isn't received. Sometimes the analogy is used of a radio broadcast, maybe from Sanford's radio station, sending out music. But if you don't have the radio turned on, you don't know whether there is music or isn't. And if a lot of people had the radios turned off, they may have discussions about whether there really is music in a radio station. There could be mythologies about it, philosophies, religions formed whether there is a radio station or isn't. But if the radio's turned on, one may begin to hear something. At first, it might be staticky, but if that dial is tuned in to just the right place, suddenly there's music. It's beautiful. It was always there. I just didn't know it was there. This is the situation for mankind these days. Part of the job and challenge that faces those of us who have some spiritual awareness is to do what it takes to let that dial be tuned finely so that we perceive accurately the broadcast of spirit. This happens when we begin to listen to the inner reality of ourselves that at first may seem far away. We may take on faith value that there is an inner self, a higher self, a divine self. But as we become more and more in step with the rhythms of heaven, we become more and more aware of this inner reality. It's part of the cleansing of heart and mind. And if we cooperate with it and let what doesn't belong pass away and take our eyes off of all of the earthly conflict, the presidential race and different forms of government and economy and taxation and coronavirus and who marries who and all the things that the talking heads are going back and forth about that want to pull us in and get us all involved. If we let that go and don't get dragged down into that level, but pay attention to the finer currents that are emerging from heaven, we can cooperate with this cleansing process. I'll give you a personal example. It's kind of funny. I grew up in New York, and part of my programming was at times to be a little pushy. You don't get around in New York if you aren't a little bit aggressive. A while back, I was in a situation where I bulled ahead in my aggressive style. It was a small thing, and nobody else particularly noticed, but I did. Afterward, I had a conversation with myself. I said, "Self, that was insensitive. You should be more aware of what's going on around you." I said, "Okay." And as you know, life brings things back up again if we're moving in a spiral, an upward spiral. And sure enough, not long after that, something similar came up. And once again, I acted in that kind of pushy way. A small thing nobody else noticed, but I did. And I was a little disappointed that I hadn't learned. But they say things happen in threes. And sure enough, a short time later, a similar situation came up again. And wouldn't you know it, the same kind of pushy programming came to the fore, and I acted in this way that was a little bit insensitive. And all of a sudden, I saw things from a higher view, and I saw how trivial it all was, and how I was wrestling with smoke. There was nothing there. And this laugh emerged from within me, and I started to laugh outwardly. And I was glad nobody was around to watch me break out in laughter. And this thing was gone. It took a few tries, but I was focused on being a man of integrity, doing the right thing, being sensitive to what's emerging from spirit. And something didn't fit. So I let it go. And afterward, I felt buoyant, lighter. That's the experience of releasing these bonds that hold us to a restricted earthly consciousness. We rise up. We come to higher ground where we begin to see things more clearly. And you can never see things clearly if you're all involved in the earthly back and forth, all the arguments and everything. If we let this process work out over a period of time, then the darkness that obscures what's present in the heaven can begin to come into view. And what we may have felt to be right, or even believed on faith to be right, or at some deeper level in ourselves, suddenly can be seen. There is a higher level of conscious knowing that does bring things to remembrance. The most important thing is we remember who we are. We aren't just this outer form. We are this eternal divine being, and we know it. That's who we are. We can begin to see the rhythms of the cosmos, the infinite number of cycles that are working out, how meticulous everything is, and how everything in the visible and invisible universe emerged from one source, moment by moment. And because everything emerges together from one source, it is all harmonious and perfect and working together if we let it. We may even see that our earthly incarnations are not that big a deal. We're here to do something as long as we can and as effectively as we can, but that's all that matters. In my own mind, I had this image of a city dweller renting a property on the shore, a house. And he arrives and finds the house isn't ideal, but it's a roof over my head. I can compensate and make it work. But the important thing is, it allows me to go down to the beach and enjoy the sea beyond it. Then when the summer season comes to an end, it's time to move back to the city. That's fine. In a way, for me, that's an analogy of incarnation. We come into a form. The way things are in the world now, it's probably not ideal, but it's a means to have access to this earthly realm so that we can do what we've come to do. And when the season's over, we can let that house go. We don't need to live in it any longer. It's okay. One of the things we see as we come to higher ground is that there are ascending cycles and descending cycles throughout the cosmos. Humankind should be in an ascending cycle, moving higher, gaining greater understanding, capable of doing more from the center of things. It's true of us individually too. But collectively, mankind has been in a downward cycle for a long time. Individually, the same thing is true. There's a thrust when we're born, there's physical growth, there's mental growth, an upward movement full of promise. But if greater understanding doesn't come, we don't move up that ascending spiral. We stagnate and then begin to descend. Things begin to fall apart. Our worlds shrink and toward the end of life often become quite small. Just the opposite should be true. Life should be expanding, and as we reach greater maturity, we find that we have capabilities in areas we hardly knew existed when we were younger. Spiritual capabilities. If you read the historical description in the book of Genesis, there was a time when humankind was functioning properly and the earth brought forth in abundance. Life was easy. Things happened because there was action at a level of cause, which was translated into the physical world, which is the way things should happen when we stand on higher ground. But humankind became too involved in earthly things, and weeds began to grow with what was brought up out of the earth, and man was forced to do things by the sweat of the face, as it's put. It became difficult and tedious because we were caught up in a physical world, working at a lower level than we were meant to work, which is where we are now, even with our computers and mechanization and all of that sort of thing. But the way is open for us to return to being divine men and women and collectively represent the positive aspect of God relative to the beautiful female essences of the earth, to bring forth something not only beautiful and enjoyable, but meaningful to all of us and to the cosmos beyond. We think we can figure everything out with our minds. We can ask deep questions. We can come to educated opinions, write treatises, have debates, talk about things endlessly. It gets nowhere. Because all it does is disturb the waters. There is, at a higher level, a field of conscious knowing. It's all there already, and it emerges fresh in every moment. Have you ever wondered why people who have a problem or concern think about it and think about it all day without coming up with a solution, and then they go to sleep and wake up in the morning and there's the answer? They finally let their minds stop their busyness, and in the healing nature of sleep, something lifts up from this conscious area of knowing that we might call the truth. It comes into remembrance. It's comforting, and it provides exactly what we need. Ruffling the waters won't get the job done, but trusting in spirit, what is emerging from this inner realm vibrationally, letting our hearts come to rest and our minds be open to receive truth, we can function gracefully, efficiently, and with purpose to do our job on earth. So there's a primary responsibility for all of us to come to higher ground continually, to handle the things that come up in our daily lives and let go what isn't right, so that we may come through more fully as beautiful divine beings inhabiting human forms on earth. Beyond that, there is the need for a collective. It's very interesting in sports and other endeavors when you have a team with one purpose, whether to win a basketball game or create some new product in the business world. Working together builds camaraderie, friendship, closeness. How much more that's true for all of humanity, because we do have one common purpose, which can only be achieved together. We are one human family. We are one team under God to represent him on earth together, to rise up to higher ground and be our true selves.